Alright, what's up, folks? Rich Van Tassel finishing up with the Saturday's game picks. I know it's Friday, it's about 11 o'clock. I just did the other video before, took some time uploading. I'm probably going to post these ones early tomorrow when I get up, so check those out then. And then, of course, as we said, do the Sunday games when we get around to that at some point tomorrow. And, of course, got the recaps. But the the Saturday instead of Sunday has made it a little difficult for me, so I apologize. But continuing on, the Indianapolis Colts 7-7, 4-3 on the road. Travel to Oakland to play the Raiders, who are 11-3, 5-2 at home. Injuries for the visiting Colts: Arthur Jones, defensive tackle, is an injury reserve out. Chris Carter, linebacker, is out. Joe Reed's guard. Rashawn Melvin, cornerback, questionable. For the Raiders, Stacy McGee, defensive tackle. Carl Joseph, safety, out. Dan Williams, defensive tackle. Amari Cooper, wide receiver. Michael Crabtree, wide receiver, questionable. We'll have to see if those wide receivers can't go, one or both of them, Amari Cooper or Michael Crabtree. That would certainly cause an issue for the Raiders, who like to pass. And they have a very good quarterback in Derek Carr. And those are two quality wide receivers, so anytime you take one of them off the field, you run into some difficulties. Latavius Murray really starting to come on, got off to a slow start because of injuries. He's probably not going to get to 1,000 yards this year. You need two monster games. Not necessarily monster, but he needs a little over 250 his final two games, so he'd have to have some good days, but he has 12 touchdowns this year. As for the Indianapolis Colts, still very much alive in that AFC South, so a victory here would certainly help them. Can they go on the road and get the win? They already have a guard that's questionable. The offensive line has been a problem. And as we've discussed all season long with the Colts, the offensive line on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive secondary on the defensive side of the ball. Now, of course, you have the injury question marks to Cooper and Crabtree. If one of them or both of them are able to go, and I always expect questionables to go, that's really going to give Indianapolis a hard time. And look for Khalil Mack and Bruce Irvin to get pressure on Andrew Luck, even if Stacy McGee can't go. That will help the line a bit. You're not having to focus on the tackle, and you can fan out to the pass rushing ends in Irvin and Khalil Mack. Even with that being said, Oakland, of course, they have to keep the Kansas City Chiefs at bay. The Chiefs play Sunday, but remember, the Chiefs have the tiebreaker, so any slip-up by the Raiders will really open the door for the Chiefs with just 2 games left. It would make it very hard for Oakland to overcome that should the Chiefs be able to tie them up. So they need the game. Not that Indianapolis doesn't, but Oakland's going to be focused, and they're going to be able to get the win in this one and attack that secondary. They pulled away late, 31-21, Oakland over the Indianapolis Colts. One of the more interesting games that I'm looking at, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 8-6, 5-2 on the road, travel to New Orleans to play the Saints, who are 6-8, 3-4 at home. Saints at 6-8, probably going to finish 7-9, possibly 8-8. So not the best of years, but the way the defense is played, you'd have to expect that. Drew Brees is putting up some sensational numbers. He's got an outside shot at 5,000 yards. Actually, it's a little better than an outside shot. He doesn't even have to go 250 in these next 2 games, which is certainly possible. So he's almost certainly going to go over that, and probably 40 touchdowns this year. Injuries for the visiting Buccaneers: Dante Dye, a wide receiver, is an injury reserve, out. The rest are questionables: Goster Cherilus, DeMar Dotson, or the rest of out: Cherilus, offensive tackle; DeMar Dotson, offensive tackle; William Goldson, defensive end; and Jerome McCoy, defensive tackle. Now, Goster Cherilus replaced Dotson last week, and he was getting handed to him, for lack of a better term, by David Irving. Now, Irving from the Cowboys is a guy who I think has potential to be a very good player, but he's still very raw, and he really made Cherilus look bad. And Cherilus was a first-round pick. He's been in the league for a while, so they've really got the question marks there. The injuries for the New Orleans Saints, all questionables: John Kuhn, fullback; Donnell Ellerbe, linebacker; Craig Robertson, linebacker; Max Unger, center; Delvin Breaux, cornerback, is an injury reserve out. Breaux is an injury reserve out. The rest are questionables. So New Orleans pass rush isn't necessarily the greatest, but certainly neither is Dallas's, and they were able to get pressure on Jameis Winston. They were bringing blitzes, so that's something to keep an eye on, especially with Cheryl now out. Jameis Winston has got to limit his turnovers. Tampa Bay, of course, a loss will not only clinch a playoff spot, or a loss by any of one of those teams, the Buccaneers, Vikings, Falcons, or the Lions on Monday night. But aside from that, Tampa Bay needs this game. Their real best shot is the NFC South, where they're a game back from the Falcons, and the division record would certainly come into play because they've both split games. So a game against the division opponent is something to look for. I like Tampa Bay to stutter the rest of the way down the season and stumble a bit. I think they'll probably finish 8-8. And I expect New Orleans to get the win. I don't think Tampa Bay is quite there yet to be able to handle a pedestrian but not terrible New Orleans team on the road in a big moment. I just don't see it happening. I see New Orleans with the injury questions, as we just stated on the offensive line, being able to come away with the victory. I like the Saints 35-28 in a high scoring game. Winston will turn the ball over in critical moments. Arizona Cardinals 5-8-1, 1-5 on the road. Travel to Seattle to play the 9-4-1 Seahawks. They're 7-0 at home. The two ties for these teams both came against each other. Injuries for the Arizona Cardinals: Tyrann Mathieu, injury reserve, out. Marcus Cooper, cornerback. DJ Humphries, offensive tackle, are out. John Brown, wide receiver. Brandon Williams, cornerback, questionable. For the Seattle Seahawks, Demontre Moore, defensive end, is an injury reserve, out. CJ Procise, running back, is out. Seattle almost certainly, well, I shouldn't say almost certainly, but it's going to be more than likely they're locked into that 2 spot. So let's see where their focus is coming into this game. Arizona, a very disappointing year. To expect them to travel up to Seattle and get a victory in this one would be highly unlikely unless New Orleans really lays an egg. I could expect New Orleans to come out not New Orleans. I could expect Seattle to come out and not be sharp for maybe the first quarter, even the first half. But I don't see Arizona having the potential on offense with their inconsistencies against that Seattle defense to be able to put them away. And I don't see it leaking into the second quarter. I do Seattle having a bit of a slow start, but they'll figure it out towards the end of the first quarter, not the end of the first half. Be able to come back. It'll be a little nip and tuck maybe going into the third quarter, but Seattle comes away with the victory 31-20 over the Arizona Cardinals. Disappointing year for the Cardinals continues. I can't even believe I'm forced to do these games at the end. San Francisco 1-13, 0-7 on the road, losers of 13 straight. Traveled to Los Angeles to play the Rams, who are 4-10. Bad year for both teams. Of course, the Rams are the only victory for the San Francisco 49ers. Their injuries: Quentin Patton, wide receiver; Torrey Smith, wide receiver, injury reserves, out. Glenn Dorsey, defensive lineman, questionable. Dante Johnson, cornerback; Joe Staley, offensive tackle, doubtful. For the Rams, Marquis Kristen, defensive back, is an injury reserve, out. Bradley Marquez, wide receiver; LaMarcus Joyner, defensive back, are questionable and doubtful, respectively. I keep saying New Orleans. Is San Francisco going to lose out? It's certainly possible. If they're going to get another win, it would be against the Rams. However, I don't see the Rams continuing to slide. So one of these teams has got to get the victory in this game, and I expect it to be the Rams. Even with the quarterback advantage, it would still be Colin Kaepernick. You look at Kaepernick's numbers: completion percentage not terrible, yardage down, but he's missed a few games. They're not throwing the ball as much, and he does only have 3 interceptions to 13 touchdowns. However, Jared Goff, I expect him to be able to attack that secondary, and with the injury to Joe Staley being doubtful, I see some pressure on Colin Kaepernick. Now, he couldn't be able to handle that because he's a mobile quarterback, but still, I just like the Rams in this one. It's a really tough game to pick against 2 bad teams. Rams come away with it, though. I'll give it 20-17. Should be a low-scoring game as both offenses struggle. The Cincinnati Bengals 5-8-1, 2-5 on the road. Travel to Houston to play the Texans, who are 8-6, 6-1 at home. Injuries for the visiting Bengals: Vontez Burfict, linebacker; Tyler Croft, tight end; Clint Bowling, guard, are all out. A.J. Green, wide receiver; Jeremy Hill, running back, questionable. For the Houston Texans, Jonathan Joseph, cornerback; Lamar Miller, running back, questionable. Houston, of course, in that nip and tuck AFC South, they hold the tiebreak advantage over the Tennessee Titans. I have Tennessee losing to Jacksonville. That'll only affect the tiebreaker more. But this game very well could come down to, or this division very well could come down to the last game. However, if Houston wins and Tennessee loses, I believe that clinches it for Houston. I'm pretty sure Indianapolis can't catch Houston at that point. I don't know what Indianapolis' scenario is exactly. They may even be eliminated. They probably need Houston to lose out and would finish tied with Tennessee to win the tiebreaker there. But that's not the point. The point is this game at this particular moment. Houston, because of their home record, I see them getting the win. Let's see what will happen with Savage being the quarterback. He came in and played well last week. I expect them to energize this team. If this game was away from home, I'd take Cincinnati because of Houston's road struggles, and I see Cincinnati getting one more win the rest of the way. However, if Houston loses this game, which is certainly possible with the backup quarterback and the pressure Cincinnati is able to create, then you have a lot of problems in Sweat City, as they call Houston. But they come away with the victory in this one, and according to the scenario I have with Tennessee losing, they lock up the division. Houston 27-24 over the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, and remember to stay tuned tomorrow. We'll try to post these early. We're actually going to be uploading this tonight. Like I said, it's about 11. We'll probably upload it by midnight. We'll post these. Then we'll do the recaps, and we'll post the remaining Christmas Day games between the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers. That's a good one. And Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs, which is also a good one. So we'll be able to go a little bit more in depth with those. Probably do those at night. Got to do the game recaps, of course, but we'll figure that all out. Like I said, I apologize. I know I rushed through these just a bit, but these Saturday games threw me for a loop because I'm working all day on Friday. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Remember, we appreciate all subscriptions, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.